Some characters take an entire season to leave an impression. Others, like Rosie Rosenthal in Masters of the Air, make an impact the second they appear. Masters of the Air follows the true story of the 100th Bomber Group in World War II. In the show, Rosie's big moment comes shortly after his introduction, where he becomes the sole survivor of a bombing run. Of course, that's an impressive feat in real life, but in a story where we've already seen other pilots face tragedy and overwhelming odds, Rosie's intro could easily have come across as cliched or just more of the same. Instead, Rosie's big moment was grounded in several key storytelling techniques that made his character instantly awesome. So let's look at what those techniques were and how you can apply them to your own writing. As with most stories, Master of the Air's early episodes are focused on establishing its characters and its setting. We meet Major Cleven and Major Egan, affectionately named Buck and Bucky, along with Barry Keoghan's Lieutenant Biddick, and a host of other young men as they gear up to start their bombing runs over Nazi-occupied Europe. We see their early trial runs, tense opening missions, and bonding scenes back at the airbase, which establish who these men are and the terrifying odds they're up against as wartime pilots. Of course, the problem is that to accurately and respectfully tell this true story, some of these men are going to have to die. Which means you'll need to introduce new characters to keep the story moving forward. But new characters risk making less of an impression than the original cast, which means these characters need to make an impact, and they need to make it fast. So, what makes a strong first impression? A high-stakes introduction. Throwing a character straight into a high-stakes situation automatically makes them feel important. Showing, not telling. This high-stakes situation should reveal the new character's personality through action, not exposition. Ideally, those actions should be simple and they should be surprising. Instead of wasting time over long details or complicated backstory, showing who this character is with a striking trait or action can define them in a much more compelling way. Knowing all that, let's look at how these principles are utilized to introduce Rosie to the audience. Now, every bombing mission in Masters of the Air is high stakes, which means audiences are already accustomed to the danger. So, for Rosie's mission to make a real impact, the situation needs to be set up with a specific set of circumstances that the audience immediately recognizes as extra bad to really stand out. This is a technique that I call crossing the streams. In Ghostbusters, the audience is told early on that crossing the streams is bad.
Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light. That's bad. Okay.
So at the end of the film, when the team does cross the streams as a last resort to beat the Marshmallow Man, it lands with a big impact because the audience understands how desperate the situation is and the potential risks of doing so. Masters of the Air does something similar by establishing specific rules within the story to let us understand the risks of being a B-17 bomber pilot before we get to Rosie's big moment. B-17 bombers are difficult to maneuver. Major Cleven jokes that he's not a fighter pilot, he's a bus driver. And in previous missions, we've seen how slow and clunky these planes are. The bombers are vulnerable alone. In an earlier mission, the planes have to rely on sticking together to stay alive, and survival isn't guaranteed. Before this mission, we've seen characters die. The show teaches the audience that pilots who try to beat the odds can and will fail, and the audience has learned to fear for these men as even established characters aren't safe. So now the stage is set for a character to come in and cross the streams.
Cross the streams.
Cross the streams.
Because the audience fully understands the dangers of doing so. Rosie's alone, he's outgunned and severely against the odds. Will he succeed? Well, yes. But it takes a little more than just beating the odds to make a character awesome. Showing how the character does it is what will make them memorable. A key element of showing instead of telling is that the actions a character takes in a moment of high tension should reveal who that character really is. So let's look at Rosie's traits that this situation is meant to reveal. Rosie's incredibly brave, highly skilled, inspiring, and he's a little crazy. Almost as crazy as you would be for not hitting that subscribe button. Rosie's actions show us all of these traits. What does he do? He flies like a motherfucking madman, of course. Facing off against multiple enemy fighters, alone in a slower, clunkier plane, Rosie commands his gunner crew to hang on tight. Then he corkscrews their B-17 through the air, moving the enemy planes within range of his gunners. The gunners fire on the enemy craft as Rosie calls out their incoming positions, cheering on his crew as they line up successful shots. And whilst this act alone cements Rosie's heroism, there are a few simple and surprising details that elevate his character into something special. You see, the show also takes the time to humanize Rosie. Many badass characters fall into the trap of being cocky or insufferable. They'll tell a joke or seem unfazed by danger.
Cool guys don't look at explosions.
And this can work if it's appropriate for the tone of the story, but in a real-to-life war drama, that would diminish the heroic effect because it would make the character feel fantastical. They don't feel human. Instead, Rosie's portrayal embraces some of the typical quirks and behaviors of real-life heroism that grounds his character by making him feel more human, which, paradoxically, makes him more awesome. In a break between the shooting, Rosie starts to sing on the intercom. This is a simple detail that highlights Rosie's a little crazy, even though he's clearly doing it to distract himself from the horrors that they're going through. Later, after the mission, one of the men says that hearing Rosie on the intercom made him feel less alone. And that shows how Rosie cares for the people around him, which is another simple trait of everyday heroism. After they land, Rosie doesn't brag or draw attention to himself. Instead, he looks out for his crew, supporting them during the debriefing and defending them when their commanding officer asks why their mission logs were incomplete. This makes him even more respectable because Rosie isn't trying to prove himself to anyone. And the other characters recognize this and look up to him for leadership. This is called the peer pressure effect. If the other characters respect him, it gives permission to the audience to respect Rosie as well. Of course, another key aspect that makes someone like Rosie so admirable is that he's an underdog going up against overwhelming odds. But what is it about underdogs that makes them so appealing? And what rules can you follow to make sure that the audience isn't just rooting for an underdog, but genuinely believes in them? To find out, watch my video on Rocky Balboa and the simple writing techniques that made him such a perfect underdog protagonist. Until next time, keep writing.